Welcome to this explainer. I am so genuinely thrilled to have you here today because we're about to get into a really deep masterclass level analysis of a topic that honestly dictates almost every single aspect of our lives, but it's rarely discussed with the actual analytical rigor it deserves. Today, we're looking way beyond just the basic mechanics of paying off debt. We're going to completely unpack the staggering mathematical and, frankly, the psychological transformation that happens the exact moment your last debt account officially closes. We're talking about achieving true financial sovereignty here.
So I really want you to sit with this question for a second. Ask yourself, what would you actually do with your money if your debt just didn't exist? You know, the personal finance world spends an unbelievable amount of time and energy telling you exactly how to pay off debt. But almost nobody stops to show you the full vivid picture of what actually happens after. What happens to your day-to-day cash flow? What happens to your investment capacity? And most importantly, what happens to your actual literal financial trajectory once those monthly payments just vanish into thin air?
Okay, let's really dive into this by looking at what I like to call a tale of two futures. On the left, we've got Diana. Diana is 34, she works in HR, makes about $67,000 a year. And honestly, by every visible measure, she's doing just fine. She's super responsible, she sticks to a budget, she even meal preps, but she's currently carrying $23,400 in credit card debt, another $28,000 in student loans from way back in 2015, plus a car note. All of that traps exactly $1,217 of her hard-earned income every single month. Now on the right side, we have Daniel. Daniel earns a really similar salary, $71,000 a year. But the difference is, 3 years ago, he cleared $41,000 in consumer debt over this incredibly aggressive 18-month stretch. His income didn't magically skyrocket, but his financial trajectory completely flipped.
Let's move into Section 1, the invisible debt tax. This is the hidden cost of debt we really need to talk about.
We really need to break down the brutal, raw math of Diana's monthly payments. Because look, most people in her situation drastically underestimate what their debt is actually costing them on a daily basis. The numbers here are just startling. She has this total monthly debt obligation of $1,217. Now, on the surface, making a $520 a month payment toward credit cards sounds incredibly responsible, right? You feel like you're doing the right thing. But at an average APR of 22%, roughly $380 of that $520 payment is pure unadulterated interest. Just let that sink in for a second. She is paying $380 every single month just to stay in the exact same place. Add in the $310 for her student loans at 6.5% and that $387 car payment, and you've got over $1,200 that simply cannot be invested. It's not building anything for her future. It's just literally leaving her account.
And that brings us to this absolutely massive number on the screen. If Diana just continues at her current payment pace, carrying this debt out to its natural conclusion, she is going to pay approximately $14,800 in credit card interest alone, plus another $9,200 in student loan interest and $2,100 in car loan interest. That totals up to $26,100 in purely interest payments. That's on top of the actual money she originally borrowed. That is $26,100 that she will simply, unconditionally forfeit to the banks.
We really have to contextualize this, right? Because interest isn't just some abstract APR percentage you glance at on your banking app. It represents the physical, tangible loss of major life milestones. I mean, think about it. That $26,100 isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. That is a fully funded Roth IRA for 3 entire years. It is a massive supplement for a down payment on a house. Or hey, it's the seed capital for almost any small business you could ever want to get off the ground. It is not nothing. It's real money that's just gone before it ever had a fighting chance to be anything. And looking at it this way makes the invisible cost of debt painfully, undeniably visible.
Which leads us directly to a really crucial definition we need to establish today, the debt tax. Listen, the interest rate is just a number on a screen, but the debt tax, that is the compounding future value of every single dollar that leaves your checking account in interest payments, instead of going toward your own investment contributions. It is quite literally a permanent, invisible tax levied on your future self. And this right here is exactly why escaping debt is far more significant than most people realize. The second you stop paying this invisible tax, your entire financial world just bursts wide open.
All right, moving to Section 2, the psychology of debt. Let's look way beyond the spreadsheet.
We have to talk about how the physiological and psychological burden of debt is honestly just as taxing as the financial math. Your brain doesn't look at a $23,000 balance and just process it as simple arithmetic. No way. It experiences it as a constant, open threat to your survival. And managing an open threat like that drains incredibly valuable cognitive resources, constantly humming quietly in the background of your mind. That is mental bandwidth that should be going toward higher order thinking, career planning, risk assessment, and long-term decision making. When you are sitting in debt, your brain is fundamentally operating in a state of chronic survival mode.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what I mean. There was a fascinating 2019 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. They actually tracked people before and then after their debts were entirely eliminated. And the results? They saw clinical anxiety symptoms drop from 78% all the way down to 53%. That is a massive 25 percentage point reduction in diagnosable anxiety strictly from the act of closing those debt accounts. Even more fascinating than that, their cognitive performance measurably improved. People actually became less impulsive and they started making way better long-term financial decisions once that heavy cognitive load was finally lifted. To ground this narrative in even more science, researchers over at Northwestern University found that carrying high debt-to-asset ratios actually correlates with measurably higher blood pressure and significantly worse self-reported health outcomes. And that's even when controlling for income levels. So guys, this is not a metaphor. Debt is a literal physiological burden. When those accounts finally closed, the physical body noticed in the exact same way the mind did.
And because of this underlying burden, talented professionals like Diana end up filtering every single major life and career decision through one silent, incredibly limiting question. Can I still cover my monthly payments if this goes wrong? Think about that. Can she take a new job with a lot more responsibility but a slightly lower base salary, even if the long-term growth trajectory is way better? Probably not, because of the payments. Can she take an unpaid passion project just to get a crucial career credential? No, the payments. Debt acts as this invisible career constraint that she never explicitly agreed to. Meanwhile, look at Daniel. His eliminated debt completely raised his career ceiling. Without having to worry about payments, one bad sales quarter or a career pivot doesn't immediately cascade into a life crisis. The floor drops and the ceiling rises. It allows him to take a lateral move with better equity upside that he absolutely never would have risked taking before.
Section 3, Avalanche versus Snowball. Let's break down the methods to actually escape the debt.
So how did Daniel actually manage to escape his $41,000 debt trap? Let's objectively debate the two most popular payoff methods out there. First up, we have the debt avalanche method. This targets the highest interest rate first while you just make minimum payments on everything else. Now, mathematically speaking, the avalanche undeniably wins. A 2016 Journal of Marketing Research study totally backs this up, showing that by minimizing the total interest paid, Daniel saved himself approximately $4,300 compared to other methods. But then on the flip side, we have the debt snowball method, which targets the smallest balance first, regardless of the interest rate. And remember that 2019 PNAS study on anxiety we just discussed? It heavily supports the snowball method because it wins psychologically. The human brain absolutely loves the dopamine hit and the momentum of permanently closing an account. So the ultimate takeaway here, if you've got massive high APR credit card debt, the avalanche is your arithmetically correct answer to stop the bleeding. But if you're someone who really needs early wins to build momentum, the snowball works wonders. Honestly, the absolute best tool is simply the one you will actually stick with and finish.
And listen, the math on accelerating your payoff timeline is incredibly brutal, but in the best possible way. Let's look back at Diana's $23,400 in credit card debt. If she pays only the bank's minimum, she clears it in 9 years, bleeding huge amounts of interest the whole way. But if she simply finds an extra $200 a month in her budget, literally just $200 to throw at that debt, she could slash her payoff timeline down to just 3 years. That one single behavioral change saves her exactly $15,000 in pure interest. That right there is the staggering difference between paying a massive tax on your own money and achieving true financial freedom. You have to find that extra $200.
Section 4, the wealth gap transformation. Let's look 10 to 20 years into the future.
Now, what's genuinely staggering about this slide is how the compounding divergence between our two examples becomes glaringly obvious when we look 20 years down the road. Imagine if Diana took her $1,217 monthly debt obligation and instead of paying banks, she invested it in an S&P 500 index fund at an 8% historical average. She would have $716,000 in 20 years, but she isn't doing that. She is servicing past debt, which means she is quietly, unknowingly forfeiting $716,000 of future wealth. Meanwhile, Daniel's consistently investing $1,100 a month of his newly freed up cash flow.
Over 20 years, at that exact same 8% return, he builds a massive $651,000 nest egg. The giant gap between them isn't about their income, their intelligence, or some crazy luck. It's purely compound interest. For years, compound interest worked against Daniel in the form of APR, but now it has totally flipped sides and is aggressively working for him.
Which brings us to Section 5, the post-debt roadmap, the actionable steps to financial autonomy.
Here's the trap. The actual day your last payment clears is exactly where most people totally lose the compounding effect. They celebrate, and then that freed up cash flow just magically morphs into better takeout dinners and a bunch of new streaming services. You must have a strict, calculated sequence ready the very moment your freed cash flow hits. Here is Daniel's exact, non-negotiable, step-by-step sequence. Step 1. Rebuild a fully funded 6-month emergency fund in liquid savings so you absolutely never have to put a crisis on a credit card ever again. Step 2. Deploy those first investment dollars to capture your full employer 401k match. Daniel bumped his contribution from 2% to 6%, locking in a guaranteed 50% return before the stock market even opens. Step 3. Max out the Roth IRA. For 2025, that's a $7,000 limit where every single dollar grows completely tax-free forever. Step 4. Max out the remaining 401k up to the $23,500 limit. And finally, Step 5. Everything left over goes straight into a taxable brokerage account using low-cost index funds.
And I want to show you the undeniable mathematical power of executing that specific roadmap by redirecting just $1,000 a month. Doing it intentionally through this exact sequence. Assuming an 8% return, you can generate nearly $600,000, $593,000 to be exact, over 20 years. Think about that. You do not need a wealthy uncle or an inheritance. You don't need to launch a viral tech startup or try to pick lucky individual meme stocks. You quite literally just need the debt payments to stop and for the redirection of your cash flow to be relentlessly intentional.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final, incredibly provocative thought to really chew on. Are you actively building your wealth, or are you just servicing your past? Diana is currently building a number she can't even see, the compounded future value of every single dollar leaving her account in interest. Daniel, on the other hand, is building a number that fundamentally changes what life decisions are available to him. If you're watching this and you see even a little bit of yourself in Diana's story, I strongly urge you to calculate your own invisible debt tax today. Run the full, unvarnished numbers on exactly what you are forfeiting. Because closing the wealth gap starts the exact moment you look at the math and decide your interest payments are simply no longer acceptable. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive today. Take this roadmap, run your own numbers, and start building your future right now.